Hello. Hello out there. How are you all? Good? Great. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's play briefing for Tiny Beautiful Things by Nia Vardalos. Welcome. Before we begin tonight, I'd just like to honour the traditional owners of the land on which we gather, the Turrbal and Yagara people. On behalf of all of the creators on this stage, this evening we acknowledge that this space, this place, has always been a site of storytelling. I am not Lee Lewis. My name is Daniel Evans, and I'm an associate artist here at Queensland Theatre, and it's my pleasure to be with you all tonight. Lee is back in the director's chair for this show, which explains why I'm here to ask all of the hard questions, the yarn event questions as I like to call them. So far this year we've been party to David Williamson's highly flammable Family Values. We've been on a rocket trip to outer space in Drizzle Boy. We've also made a jaunt to the forest of Arden and into the gnarly terrain of Tasmania. But next we're going straight to the middle of your heart. Tiny Beautiful Things is based on the book by Cheryl Strayed, who is many things: a wife, a mother, a daughter, a writer, an ex-heroin user, and as of the beginning of the play, an unpaid anonymous advice columnist called Sugar. Amidst the clutter of family life, she receives letters emailed from a chorus of strangers urgently needing her help to navigate the contradictions and complexities of life. What would you tell someone who is unsure about role-playing as a sexy Santa, or the father who feels as dead as his lost son? Sugar replies with candour, offering her own tough, sweet brand of unadulterated advice, designed to offer a path of healing and catharsis. This is a rich and beautiful work filled with the fragments of 100 real-life letters. Part verbatim, part agony aunt column, this is a piece of theatre set over one night that plays as a sort of symphonic tribute to all of the big things happening in little anonymous lives. And it's brought to life by this brilliant group of artists sitting here. I might ask you to introduce yourself from the end and the role you play in the production. Should we start at... Is that Lee Lewis at the end?
It's Lee Lewis sitting at the end. Thank you, Daniel Evans. I'm Lee. I'm directing it. And I have no idea what to say about this play, which is very unusual for me, so I'm going to hand over to Brady.
Hi, I'm Brady and I'm the composer sound designer.
Hello, I'm Bernie Tanhayes and I will be the lighting designer.
I'm Simone Romanyuk, I'm the set and costume designer.
My name is Seppi Bergiani and I am letter writer number 2.
My name is Mandy McElhinney and I'm playing Sugar, Cheryl Strayed.
My name is Stephen Geronimos and I'm playing letter writer 1.
My name is Nick Pryor, my pronouns are they, them, and I'm playing letter writer number 3.
Thank you. Now, I'm not going to be asking all the questions tonight. I will be opening up to you. Fine folks, so log those questions if you have them, but I will kick us off. And I'm coming to Lee Lewis down the other end first. Lee, I have many questions, but I'm going to ask 2. Number 1, every play is a kind of world unto itself. And I'm interested to know what makes this world unique. What should we know going into it? What have you sort of discovered as it's been unfurling in the rehearsal room? Because it's a bit of a unique universe, this one.
Dan, I have not come across a play like this before. It's, as an experience reading it, it struck me in a very unexpected way. I feel like it's more musical in its structure. I think there are movements and I think there are rhythms and tempos and different instruments, if you like, but it's not like a storytelling play. The story of humanity rises up through the play and you find yourself in a very different place at the end to where you started, but if you asked me what it was about, I wouldn't be able to tell you the story beyond the story of a woman who writes an advice column and gives advice to people, which, again, I don't know if that sells tickets. So I find myself in a quandary in that I loved the play. I loved thinking about how to open up the experience for the audience. But I feel like it's a really sophisticated, emotional, human theme park ride rather than a play.
Whoa. Okay.
I mean, practically speaking, it's set in a regular rental house of a regular human, a mum of two who's just cleaning up at the end of the night. And what's so astonishing about it is how recognisable that is. And we've had kind of great fun building that world in the fake way. I mean, for all those people who've lived that, it might not seem that much fun to make that world, but there's been hysterical conversations between the people who are the actual real-life exhausted parents working on this play, and I'm like, oh, what could be a piece of garbage that they pick up? Maybe like a lollipop stick? And she'd go, oh, yes, and they're just everywhere. And you go, so it's that, the texture of ordinary life, because the problems in the play are all of the texture of the ordinary life problems that people carry. And that moment when you go, I need help, what do I do about this? Where do you go to for help? And in this situation, people go to a woman called Sugar. And this is based on Cheryl Strayed's actual life. She actually did this, and for a period of time, she took that job on for some crazy reason. She decided to become an unpaid advice columnist, and she wasn't qualified for it, but she decided to say yes. And then this thing happened in her life where she probably learned more about humanity and herself than helped people, possibly. But she then went on to write a book about it, and now it's become a TV series, and her life has unfolded because of this, I think. So I think structurally this is an unfolding structure rather than a momentum structure.
Yeah, great. I don't want to ruin anything, so you just all shout at me if I'm about to do a massive plot spoiler, as I'm prone to doing these things all the time. I'm wondering, formically, this work kind of works as Sugar answering letters, and those letters arrive via a chorus of letter writers. Mandy, hello. Long-time fan, first-time caller. Your character, Sugar, kind of sits at the centre of all of those letter writers, and I'm wondering, what struck you about maybe the play or the character when you first read it? What made you go, I might need to do this, you know?
In the risk of repeating what Lee said, I was intrigued and moved deeply by it, and still am. It's fairly impossible to do this play without feeling something. You will feel something. But I couldn't work out why. It just, it altered me, it changed me. And I couldn't articulate why. And I think some of the most profound thing about this is that this woman has the courage to actually articulate things that often do not have words. And she articulates them in incredibly beautiful, moving, and very real kind of writing. So the writing is beautiful, and the stories are all real. And I think the way that it's set in an ordinary house, in an ordinary life, we are able to see the miraculous things that happen to us every day and that we take for granted, and that every day has the possibility of being a miracle, something beautiful happening, or seeing the beautiful in the ordinary. And there's great gratitude in the play, I think. So it's transformative. I think it's a really transformative piece. So yeah, did that answer your question?
That was a beautiful answer. That was lovely. Thank you. Follow-up question. What's the experience? You've had a chance to do it a couple of times now in terms of the company run. I think you did a run upstairs this afternoon, maybe. What's the experience like for you doing it? Is it kind of like, do you have to like just surrender yourself to the flow of the piece, or do you find that are you still like, what do I say next? Or can you even comment on that yet, on what it feels like to sit inside of this crazy theme park ride of experience? What does it feel like?
I think every night will be different, as most theatre is, but this particularly so, I think, because sometimes the letter writers just come with a different energy that just makes you hear something for the first time that you haven't heard before. So it's an incredibly live kind of experience, and every night will just be, there's great trust and between us all, and I think we'll just go on the ride. Some nights I find myself, days, we're not in nights yet, some days I find myself incredibly moved at points that I wasn't the day before, and I think we'll just have to ride that with each other. But we hopefully will do it with great respect, that these are real people these things happen to. And we understand there is the responsibility that people will be hearing things in the audience that is very close to what they're experiencing at that time. And so the audience will really change the experience every night, I think, because we'll be aware of the way it's affecting people. Everyone will have very different reactions to the letters, but some of them will hit very close to home.
The interesting thing about this one, Dan, is sending it out to people and all of the cast and all the designers is everybody sort of, you send it out and say, hey, we're thinking of doing this play, would you do it with me? Which is a little bit like dating. But everyone kind of started going, oh, this is a bit odd. And by the end, we're like, absolutely, I will do it. And they weren't able to say why. There's something incredibly compelling in this writing. And maybe it's her outrageous honesty. And like you said, the courage to speak into the silences, where most of us are incredibly inarticulate. Her job as an advice columnist was to offer something. And so she did, from a very experienced in life place rather than learned way.
Yeah. I want to touch on the incredible ensemble of letter writers, Seppi, Stephen, Nick. What I find really interesting when I read this work, and I was fortunate enough to sit in a room with you all and hear it read, and one of the biggest questions right at the beginning of the process was, how do we distinguish between all the different letter writers? Because between you, I think you are, is it like 80 to 100, I don't even have a number, like it's almost like 80 to 100 letters or real people. What's been the process of finding your way through the work? And there's no huge costume changes or moments of wardrobe. How have you found playing inside of it?
You used all the costume budget on Drizzle Boy.
Yeah. Yeah, the polar bear was expensive. So apologies. So how are you coping with that?
Well, I can start. I think at first when I read it, I thought, oh, we're gonna have to do so many different types of people and make it very clear as to who each person was, which can be very, overwhelming thought. But then as we started reading it more and more, I realized that it was actually in the subtleties from person to person, that it's not about overdoing any of the people or the characters, because they're not characters, they're human beings writing in. So it was really a matter of finding that subtlety between each one. That's a starting point, if anyone wants to.
I think also once you boil it down a little bit, it's because these people are real people, and we're trying to honor that and do that justice. I think it takes kind of a step away from the idea of character acting, and building larger than life characters and really condensing it to people are in a lot of ways quite homogenous, and it is just, you know, little how they carry themselves, where they speak from, how their energy sits in their body, and these little things do enough that you can recognize that it's someone new without overdoing it, I think.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, pacing and tonal. Our tone shifts from one person to the next, sometimes more than others and sometimes less. Or like Nick is saying, how we carry ourselves, and pacing of a walk, of energy, of the speaking, so yeah.
I think it's been really fun to explore the blurring of time and space and identity, and that's what makes this work so unusual. Is as actors, we usually have set characters, set costumes, and it's a little grayer in this one, and a little bumpier, and as Mandy said, it will be different every night, and it's fun exploring that.
There's also an interesting thing, Dan. Something in this play, strangely, and maybe it's the time we're in, this play from America, given our relationship to America and how complex that's becoming, it was really lovely to find a play that believed that we're all actually inherently connected and that we actually share more human experiences than we diverge. I think I found a sort of comfort in that at this time. Someone who was willing to write into humanity as a whole and believe in the connectedness rather than the separation. And maybe that's where the idea for how to do this happened, because yeah, they could be doing different accents or different costumes on all of the characters, but there's something in the play that believes that if I sit there and listen to that problem of that person, it might not be my problem, but I know someone who's struggling with that, and I've talked to a friend about that, and you kind of go, these are some of the questions and problems that are moving through all of us in our different societies, and I found there was something really, I don't know, maybe just comforting. And that's where the hopefulness rises up inside it, where you go, we can actually empathize with people who have lived very different problems to our own. I can give you empathy. I can find compassion within me for something that is so different to my experience. And watching the actors blend gently helps me to do that. Because any of these stories could live inside them as individuals. You just don't know who you're sitting next to on the bus, right? And what they're carrying that day. It could be in any one of them. So, and that's not about my hair is different. It's about where do I carry that in my body at the moment, and how do we start feeling each other better? How do we turn up the dial on our sensitivity towards how people are suffering, and what are the secrets they're keeping? So there's something of hope in there, I think.
Beautiful. We probably should always say also that Cheryl, or Sugar's advice, is very beautiful, and it's so wonderfully, as you would expect, wonderfully written, and very moving, at times very, very funny. I'm wondering, cast, maybe not everyone, but do you have a favourite letter that you look forward to saying or writing in during the show? Is there one that's really close?
Yeah, there's some that are close, I think, for every one of us. And that truth resonates in our performances. I look forward more to the responses as the letter writers. So I can't wait to hear what Sugar's gonna say. So if I have questions, some of them I have favorite answers for.
Right. What about you guys, Dibby?
I love a lot of the tiny little moments. There's a lot of characters that just pop in and pop out, and maybe you see them again, maybe you don't. We don't quite know because there's such a blurring of identity in it, but it's fun being these people for just maybe 5 seconds sometimes. I always look forward to those little spicy moments.
Yeah, great. Any spicy moments?
Yeah, we all love sexy Santa. There's a role playing letter which we keep touching on because it's lighthearted. We can talk about it. that's always fun. But yeah, I think it's less about like, it's less about, oh, I look forward to this letter, and it's like, oh, I look forward to these three sentences that come one after another. Like, I think towards the end of one of the first letters, there's a sequence of 3 sentences, and I'm like, that's golden. But yeah.
With that said, I will say I have a couple times where I get to sassy ask Sugar like what this whole business is all about that she's doing, and I do really enjoy that quite a bit. It shows.
Simone, we are on your beautiful set, or the beginnings of your beautiful design. It's quite stunning. It's not every day that we see a house, the skeleton of a house in this space. What were some of the, how did you start to even conceive what this play would be set inside of? Do you remember what the first kind of instinct was, or?
Yeah, so we did speak about it being a naturalistic rental house, because throughout the play she is doing chores, you know, she's put the children to bed and she's doing the normal chores that any mother would do, as well as working from home and doing those late night sort of things. So it has a lot of practical things that it needs to have within the space. But because these letter writers come in and out, and they just occupy her mind and her attention at any moment when she's doing something else or when she's working. So I talked to Lee about doing these, not having any walls, so that the letter writers could sort of occupy the space in a different way. And just in the same way that, say, if you read a very interesting letter, you will think about it at any moment. They can just come into her space and into her world at any time. So that was the sort of the concept behind working towards this set. And then the practical things come of doing a floor plan, and where's the kitchen going to be, and where's the living room going to be, and how's she going to move from one space to the other, and knowing that the letter writers would be sort of flowing around her and on and off the set in a different way. Sugar walks through the doorways and uses the space in a normal way, whereas the letter writers don't have to do that. So that was the idea.
You have to walk through walls.
Well, it was the challenge. It was the challenge of, we want to be in a house. The real time version of the house is one night before she goes to bed. So she's going to be living in a real time, but the actual imaginative time of the play goes about 18 months, which was the length of time that she wrote this column. So we travel from her saying, yes, I'll do it, through to the end when she actually finally told her fans who she actually was. Because as a writer, her advice was so unusual, she started to gather up this huge fan base who were desperate to know who she was. And then her career with Wild and Reese with the Spoon and everything started to get huge, and she became really too busy to write it. So she had to tell people who she was. So by the end of the play, we do know who she is. But that happens in a real time and in an imaginative time. So it was a real space and an imaginative space with people who were there sometimes and not there sometimes. So I just said to Simone, there you go, that'll be fun. And magically she came back with this space with no walls, which we've been imagining for the last 4 weeks in the rehearsal room. And there was a great moment where Bernie came in, and we were doing one section, and Stephen was standing behind a desk, which is back in there. He was standing behind the desk, it's not there yet. And he said to me, he won't be visible there. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, he won't be visible standing there. I said, oh no, he's on the second story. He's up high. And he was like, oh, I hadn't got that. Okay, great. I was like, oh, bad second story acting, Stephen. So we're just about to move into this space and see how it works with the proper upstairs and what it's like to go through these walls. But it was a great naturalistic and impressionistic playground that Simone invented. And as soon as I looked at it, I went, oh yeah, that'll work. Maybe we can move that pole there and that pole there, but otherwise the principle of it, I kind of could see the play happening in open and imaginative ways for the cast. So 3 of them get to sit down an awful lot. Mandy gets to work an awful lot. There was a point where she sits down towards the end of the play and she said, you know, this is the first time I've sat down. I'm like, oh, really? Sorry about that. So she does a lot of cleaning, and apparently you've been cleaning your apartment as well, quite thoroughly. So sometimes the plays infect your life in that way.
I love that. Bernie, Brady, we're coming to you. First of all, excellent shirt for lighting designer. I really appreciate that shirt. Just let's get out of the way. Bernie and Brady, I'm getting the impression this is a real kind of slippery visual world. Does that kind of, is that impacting your designs that you're currently creating? Because of course, your work starts not tonight, but tomorrow, as you begin to bring this thing to life. What kind of considerations are going into your design for this work?
I think that the challenge here is for me, is to thread that line to assist the kind of the narrative to progress and to assist the storytelling of all of these different characters. So a lot of my design and lighting focus is going to be in the cueing and the plotting and the weaving of that. So we'd look at lighting design in this instance as kind of like film editing, where we're bringing foreground to background and background to foreground, and consciousness to unconsciousness, and just weaving this through the progression of the piece.
Emotional temperature, things like that, fade outs, sort of crossfades across the space. So it's actually.
I love a crossfade.
I know.
And I love emotional temperature. I'm going to use that.
And all within the framework of the naturalism established, so we have something to ground ourselves.
But then, of course, there's the emotional place that people are sitting in their houses, maybe like this one, maybe like other ones, writing these letters. They're sitting alone writing these letters to this person they don't know, saying help. And Bernie was like, some of them feel like there's just a shaft of sunlight on them. Like, that's possible. So in this night, in this house, there are other lighting possibilities as well. There are not a lot of rules for this play, which is possibly what attracted this very strange group of people to the idea of it. So sometimes you get a play and you go, oh, this is a great play, and we kind of all know how to do it. And honestly, you as audience know how to respond to it. You know how to be engaged. And then sometimes it is actually a big journey that we all go on. And there's something of that in the light of this. To just go, I don't know what this is. It feels like we're at the end of a movement. We've been talking between Brady and Bernie, talking about where we've found the actual natural ends of movements, how we make that happen in not obvious ways with light and sound. So we've been working quite sculpturally in a funny way, or like an installation work. But that being said, the script is beautiful. So it just doesn't fit into any of the ways we're used to working, which is kind of wonderful. Again, writers will surprise us with possibilities we haven't imagined. And I think that's the magic of this story. I could never have imagined it.
I love that. Brady, I'm just going to come to you, if I can just see there. How are you going? How are you?
With the show or just in general?
Just in general.
Beautiful. Thanks. Great, thank you. Yeah, pretty good.
And how, in terms of sonically, what can we expect to kind of hear? What should we be listening out for in this work?
Well, I mean, that's a big question. Most of the show, I think, the show itself, as Lee said, has really like no limitations. There's like no parameters. There's you could do anything with that, which is both very freeing and frightening at the same time, because where do you start? So I think I was most drawn to one of the last letters in the story, which is one of the more emotional ones. I'm not talking about it in great detail, but I started there because I knew I was drawn to that, and for about 3 weeks I've tried to work out how to get there without it coming out of nowhere, how to not score an entire show where each scene is a reset and has a different vibe and has a different tone to it, but get to a place where it's musical, it's a bit more immersive, but it doesn't overdo anything. We're not trying to drag any emotion out of you that you don't want to feel. But also make a dynamic show, and I think mostly responding to kind of what was found in the room, and the pace and the structure that we kind of found was more informative for me than reading the script was
No, to be fair to Brady though, she's been trying to drag me into this play for about 6 months. She kept sending me things, different sound files, different songs. She's like, what about this as a starting place? And I go, no. And spit it out back to her, and she would come at me with something else. And eventually she found something where, yeah, she was definitely way ahead of me thinking about this one. So I feel like at the beginning she had a sense of where she wanted to go, and then just really carefully waited to see what the sound of the play was before she forced it in. Yeah, so it's been again an exploration, starting with some ideals rather than ideas.
Great. There's a lot here. Are there any pressing questions out in the audience that you would love to ask? Someone have any? Hello, yes, over here, second row.
What is the time and place of the original set play, and have you translated it to the here and now?
What is the?
I think it was originally on stage. I don't remember when she wrote the book.
2010.
Thank you. And it was originally on stage, I want to say in 2018-ish. Yeah. So it was originally set as a present of the moment thing. It wasn't looking back to the 2010s. That being said, some things feel like they might have shifted. Did we talk about? So it's a now sensibility.
Set in America?
It is set in America, yeah.
So have you translated it to an Australian context, or kept faithful?
No, we are keeping this in an American voice and an American house, which means that we've been buying all sorts of American foodstuffs to put in the fridge, and Seppi has been very happy. She's been putting in requests for various snack foods she'd like to eat during the play, and interesting again that question about inward-looking works. There are some things that are distinctively American in there, not places or anything like that, but ways of thinking. And I think that's kind of nice. I want to go on a bit of a trip now. We've been in a very Australian place for a few shows now, and I feel like reaching out to the rest of the world. And there was something in this that made that possible. It's kind of like, it is an American play, but again, the surprise of the reminder of how similar we are as humans in a particular time with particular pressures. So, yeah, I like to think we can have an experience of congruence, emotional congruence with our American friends, if you like, as opposed to looking at all the horrific ways we're being driven apart.
Right. Yes, up here.
What can you tell us about the playwright, where she lives, what she did before she became a playwright, sort of age group?
More about the playwright. You want to dig into who the person who wrote this amazing little play.
I will say I haven't talked to Cheryl Strayed, but I feel like in reading her work, I feel like she talks very strongly. So I've got this imagined version of her. She had a very complex younger life where she made lots of mistakes, and she writes about those in great detail in her work and is very open about how that's given her knowledge. I kind of liked the fact that she messed up so much stuff, it gave her things that she could offer to people and say, well, look, this is how I messed it up. This is what it taught me. Maybe that will help you. But so Mandy, you would probably be able to talk more from inside her about the stuff you've been finding.
She lives in the northwest of America, but she grew up in middle America. She wanted to be a writer for a very long time, and while she was writing as Sugar, she was putting the final touches on her second novel, Wild, which when that was published, which is after this play, after this time in her life, she became a superstar. She was on it was Oprah's book club, you know. So her life changed dramatically after this point. So when the play was written, based on the collection of books, of letters that she'd compiled and made another novel out of, it's the moment in her life before she became who she is now, which is a successful writer. So we find her in the play with two young children trying to finish a book, taking on this unpaid job to respond to people anonymously, and it was the making of her, and now she is a very successful writer. Yeah.
She didn't write the play. It was Nia Vardalos who wrote My Big Fat Greek Wedding, who got together with a friend of hers, Tommy Kail, who may know as the director of that small play, Hamilton. They got together around this book and said, I think this is a play, which is crazy because it's a book about this thick and there's nothing to recommend it as a play, really. And then it had quite a long conversation between the two of them, and they did a number of developments, reading different letters, seeing what happened as it shaped towards this play. And it is beautifully constructed, but I think it was a surprise to them how it connected to audience and how needed it was. And that's kind of how it came to us. If it had not worked so well in a surprising way, we wouldn't have considered it in a funny way. But Cheryl herself never had a lot of money, and a lot of the experiences that she speaks from is from being in the struggling layer of America, where there's not a lot of, there is no money to protect you from the problems that you have. So I suppose it's given her a base of community, if you like, or even an understanding of what it is to be stuck in struggle. So she speaks with an incredibly authentic sense of what that is as she's offering that to people. She doesn't have a distance from problem because she lived a lot of them. And she talks very openly about her history with heroin, problems that she'd had with different people in her life, and I think all of that. There's not so much of that in this work, but anyone who's looked at the story a while and read that, you get a sense of the difficulties she'd encountered and how she'd sort of not very successfully survived but sort of fought her way through. Would that be fair? No, again, what I love is that she doesn't ever offer a silver bullet to problems. Oh, if this is the problem, you do that. Because she's lived through how hard it is to get out of where you are. And I love the feeling that sits inside this play of just that moment in your life where you actually think there's no way out. You've got two kids. She says early on, I've got, my husband's an artist, I've got two little kids, I've got mountains of debt. Of course I can't write a free advice column. But then she says yes. And there's something about her saying yes to things that seem stupid, how your life turns. Saying no to some things. How the hell do you learn how to do that as a human? You know, it's very fine-grained humanity that sits inside her, and how she's managed to take some of the catastrophic things that have happened to her and turn that into words. I don't know, there's a magic craft in there somewhere.
Yes, hello in the blue.
I wondered how you settled on Mandy, because you haven't worked at QT before, have you? No.
No, my first time.
We mainly know her from the small screen. Did you sort of feel she's exactly the right person for the role? Or?
Absolutely the right person for the role. But this is also, sometimes, very rarely my job is about wish fulfillment, and I have wished to work with Mandy for a very, very long time. She doesn't know this, but her agent has turned me down numerous times because she's been so busy on the small screen. That's fine, I totally forgive you. But no, there are some people who carry particular qualities, and looking at the idea of what sugar was, that imaginative space of sugar, I needed someone with extraordinary theatre craft, and I knew that from watching Mandy way back, before she got super famous. She was such a technician, and her heart was always available to the audience on stage. And that's something that not every actor carries with them. There's an inherent warmth, and some actors we inherently trust. and we need that in a character. And it's literally a handful of people. You know, there's some people you just want to hug, and that quality they can gift to a role. And sometimes, and I felt like that needed to be at the heart of this. We needed to trust what was coming from this woman, and she needed to be able to carry a lot of words. There's that too. So it's a combination of craft and then quality. And yeah, so she said yes, and I was therefore doing the play. If she'd said no, we wouldn't be doing the play. Pretty straightforward. Bet she didn't know that.
No.
Thank you for saying yes.
It's been a dream come true for me to work with Lee as well. Yes, we're Sydney people. And
Once upon a time.
Once upon a
I'm
time.
a Queenslander now, thank you very much.
Yes.
Look at my big coat, I'm freezing today.
There's a question. Yes, up there.
I was going to ask, is there a sense of danger or even trepidation of Sugar answering people's letters that are obviously heartfelt when she has that qualification?
Shall I repeat that
I
question?
wouldn't do it. But every time I answer a letter as Sugar, I'm floored by the generosity and courage that, because she can be very, very blunt and honest, and doesn't take the easy path, telling people, oh, it's all right, just keep doing what you're doing. She will risk challenging people with all of her responses. But it's always done with a great deal of empathy and compassion and lack of superiority.
There's a whole little section in the play where the readers question her, ask her what her qualifications are you even qualified to do this? And she says no. I'm not, I'm just writing from personal experience. And I think it was interesting that her readers picked up that there had been a change, because someone had been writing Sugar before her and after her, but they picked up, there was a change of voice, and they were like, who the hell are you? And she's like, hey! And they questioned, and she was very honest in her answer about, I'm not offering anything professional here. And so I think the tenor of the column changed enormously for that time.
Yes, down the front here.
Yes, you mentioned that it has become a series on American TV. Is it running now? Has anyone watched it? Or
We've all watched it. Sorry, Stephen hasn't watched it.
No, I haven't watched it at all. I didn't want to, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that a no-no? But clearly.
We had a conversation about it. Mandy had watched it, and then I went away and watched it, and then Seppi watched it, and we all agreed that it's very, very different to both the play and the novel. It exists in a different space, and it takes, I don't want to say liberties, because I feel as though that carries judgment with it. It's great TV, but it's TV. And it diverges from the original text in a way that, upon watching it, I didn't feel as though I had, ruined my chances of doing this in a way that was authentic to how we were approaching it, because it just is so entirely different from what is on the page, what is on our page, and also what we have created.
It was streaming on Amazon. If you want to have a look, but it's much more about Cheryl Strayed and
Disney.
her husband
Disney
and
Plus.
her kids. So what was that?
It's on Disney.
It's on Disney Plus.
Disney. Oh, sorry.
If you feel like watching it, you can watch that and walk into this and have a completely different experience.
But this is better.
Yeah, I would say just wait, watch this first and then watch that.
Yes.
I guess hello, by the way, and thank you for this. I'm curious for Mandy and then for Lee, what do you guys think is the rationale for Sugar writing the column? What's the deep down reason for her to take it on?
That's in the play.
Okay.
Is that okay? It's really beautiful when she realizes why she did it. Because she didn't know at the beginning, and then she discovers what this became to her. And the way she writes it, I can't spoil that for you.
See,
I believe that there's an element of her procrastinating, can't say that word, procrastinating because she's meant to be finishing her book, and she just finds herself saying yes to something without knowing that it will change her life, as a lot of people do with a lot of things.
Yeah, you're right about the procrastination. I have this huge book, I have to finish it, I don't want to finish it. Oh, if I just do this little thing.
Yeah, and I can convince myself that I'm still working, but I'm not working at what I'm meant to be doing, you know, but
I don't find that familiar at all.
Any other questions out there? I'm going to come around. We've got time for a couple more. Does anyone have any question? Am I not seeing someone? At the back? Where?
There we go.
The white jumper. You saw a little finger?
Dan, just sorry.
Yes. Yes.
On the face of it, you've got a play made up of a whole lot of letters. I'm just sort of, and I guess all you said tonight partly answers, but how do you progress from that to something which is going to appear on stage and hold an audience? I guess it has to be in the writing to start with, I suppose.
It's in the writing. You progress, but because the writing inspires a whole group of people to think it's possible that it can stand up. It is a beautiful book to read, but it's a big book. I sort of appreciate the distillation, the choices, and it suggests that she sits at her kitchen table. We just went further with that. I don't know what the New York production looked like. And I don't always stay away from other productions. Usually it doesn't bother me, but there was something so strange about this one. I just didn't want to put any other pictures in my head of how it could be done. I wanted to work my way through it with these people. Again, it's a strange one, but choosing plays is a little like falling in love. Sometimes you can't control it. Sometimes you make yourself love a play. But sometimes you just fall in love, and that's what happened. I didn't really even want to do this. It was kind of read the play. It was kind of a favour to a friend. It was a friend of a friend who brought it to me. His friend said, can you read it? I'm like, sometimes, that's okay, that's what I do. But I started, and by the end I was like, I'm going to do this play. And sometimes there's a bit of mystery inside there, and if you're lucky, you get to do the play that you say you're going to do. A lot of stuff has to fall into place for that to happen, but there was something, it was a need that was maybe inside me to do the play, and I kind of go, all I think of myself as is the first audience for some of these ideas. I see myself mostly sitting with you, going, if I want to see this, I trust that other people want to see that. Sometimes I'm wrong, but it was answering some sort of need in me that I couldn't articulate at the time, and it did it in such a positive way, there's some very confronting stories. I went, oh my God, you took me there. As a writer, you took me there, you took care of me, and you gave me insights I could not have come up with by myself. And I can take those insights out into my life, and I reckon they're going to help. And I kind of went, as weird as you are, little play, I'm going to try and do you. And then I managed to convince everybody else, but I didn't convince them. The play convinced them. Bernie got back to me very quickly. He's like, yeah, I'm in.
I cried.
Yeah, and again, in this time, works that allow us access to our big emotions. I think there's a thing going on in playwriting at the moment. Could be generational, could be just where we've got to, where we're allowing a lot more emotion into our storytelling. It's unwieldy. Sometimes the forms are not great, sometimes they're interesting, but if you look back to 20 years ago, there's a lot more emotion allowable on stage at the moment. And this is a big emotion play, and I kind of went, okay, you are really pushing the boundary on how much emotion we let into this. And also, it kind of tickled my fancy that this was against all the marketing recommendations of all the marketing research last year. This is what people really want to see after COVID, after all of these problems. I'm like, they wanted to see light comedies. So I'm like, okay, so there's this little play that I think speaks to beneath our need for light comedies. It just says, we want to see amazing actors up close doing amazing work, and we definitely need amazing writing. Better than Netflix. We need writing that's better than Netflix. We want an intensity of experience that you can get in the live space, but that takes a certain amount of intensity in writing. So this is me going completely against all the marketing advice. So I'm crossing my fingers that this works, so that we can start getting back into a place where I'm not listening to marketing advice about what to program, but actually going back into an instinct place for an audience traveling together through time.
On that note, we have to pause because it's time for everyone's favourite part of the subscriber artist briefing, and that is the raffle. So we have double the prizes tonight. We've listened to your feedback. There are more winners tonight than ever before. So get those tickets out, people. All right.
What are the prizes, Dan?
The prizes. The first five prizes tonight are a double pass to a movie of your choice to Dendy Cinemas at either Cooperoo or Portside, so you can treat yourself to a night out. And let's get some.
Mandy, you're definitely joining some
Try to pull
tickets.
the first one.
Sexy
Sexy Santa. All right, here we go. Stephen, pull it out. And the winner is, first one.
Blue B16.
Blue B16. Great! Down the front here, pause there. We're going to get you a ticket in a second. Next, let's go. Oh, Nick, give it. Well, everyone gets a go. All right. Who else is going to this movies? Tell us.
Blue B43.
Blue B43. Blue. Here, brilliant. Next. Okay, next one. Mandy, here we go.
Something.
Yeah, it might be blue.
Yes, it's Blue
It's
B.
blue. It's a good night for blue.
Blue B 95.
Yes! Great. Hold up there. Okay, next one. I think we've got two more double passes to go. Seppi.
Purple A13.
Purple A13. Yes! Yeah, great. Is there one more? One more movie? Is this the big one? Is this the big one or is this the movie pass?
No, we've got one more.
One movie pass. And then we get a bigger prize, which is really cool. Okay, here we go. Simone.
I can't get one without the
Blue B7.
Blue B7. Anyone? Oh. Okay, we're going for a redraw.
Redraw.
Oh, you got one? Oh, down the front.
No.
That was close. Okay, here we go. This is the final prize. We're going to do a drum roll for this one, everyone. The final prize is a $200 gift voucher to Epic Hair Design. You are getting a makeover. Stand by. I know, it's wild. Here we go. Drum roll, everyone. Drum roll. Oh, here we go. I've got a good feeling about this one. It's blue. It's B. And it's 3. 0, 3. Oh my gosh, you did the makeover. You didn't change your life. Amazing. Oh, well, you're getting, well, I can inform you again, you're getting a makeover. You're getting a $200 hair voucher. You're going to love it. You look great, trust me. Okay, before we finish up, today, coming up after this beautiful play, we have Hannah Polanski's Don't Ask What the Bird Looked Like, which is finally here after a 3-year delay. It is going on this year. Lee assures me. It's going on. Hell, high water. And also today we have
Don't
launched
talk about high water.
That's true. She's singing it. Oh my gosh. Also today we have launched our annual appeal. So this year we are asking you to dig deep and donate towards our teaching artists. Now give me a moment. Let me just say that the teaching artists are the lifeblood of this company. They are a literal army of artists of all ages who share their artistic skills inside classrooms from Brisbane to Bundaberg, Coolangatta to Cairns. They work year-round through a suite of programs across the state to help hundreds and hundreds of young people build their confidence and self-esteem by empowering them with the fortitude to tell their own stories and to stage the stories of others. They work to ensure we have artists in the future, people who will one day walk this stage, but also to help students everywhere realise that the theatre is not just a building that we sit inside, but it's an art form where we build empathy, forge deep connection, and work together to enable transformation. So if you have $10, $20 or 20,000, call us.
As a teaching artist, your money helps me not go back to the restaurant industry.
Save me from hospitality.
Please.
Finally, thank you so much to the cast and crew of Tiny Beautiful Things. Thank you for being here tonight. I think what's interesting is kind of like mystery of what's at the centre of this, and I think the mystery kind of really works on you. When I had the privilege of being part of one of the first reads of this play, I actually walked out of the rehearsal room and it kind of all just hit me immediately, and it was a really, really profound experience. So maybe called Tiny Beautiful Things, but know that it is a very big and a very beautiful thing that you're going to be witnessing here on stage from Saturday. So on behalf of all of us, good luck to you guys for the rest of the week, and please put your hands together also for Sophia, our translator tonight. Thank you for coming on stage. We look forward to seeing you in the theatre real soon. Thank you everyone, good night.